Hello, this is Retro Remy, and welcome to looking at every version of Virtua Fighter that came to a Sega console. The original Virtua Fighter. We're not looking at the entire series, maybe one day, but today we're just looking at this beautiful gem. These games originally came out, the arcade version came out in 1993, and we got our home conversions in 1995. So in 1993, Virtua Fighter got the crown of being the first ever polygonal 3D fighting game. However, just because it's a polygonal 3D fighting game doesn't mean it is actually fully plays in 3D. So there's no sidestepping in the original Virtua Fighter. It is still primarily played on a 2D plane. You do move around as the fight goes on, but you don't have a tremendous amount of control over whether or not that happens. Giant swing! Look at that damage. So the damage in the original Virtua Fighter is absolutely wild. While not the first version of the game to come out, I think it is the most primitive version of the game, so I wanted to take a look at the Sega 32X version here first. And while hands down the ugliest version of the original Virtua Fighter, it actually plays very competently. It plays very much like the original Virtua Fighter, so I can't imagine a situation in which you would only have a 32X, but this is actually a pretty good version of the game, and one I spent a lot of time with back in the day. Although this would actually be the last version of the first Virtua Fighter I would play, because I just got it last. I didn't get this version until I was picking the bones of the old consoles of the day back in the early 2000s, when I got this for a couple bucks. And for a couple bucks, I absolutely loved it. I would suggest playing it for free any way you can. Leave that to you to figure out. But it, despite its visuals, it's still a really strong version of the game, and I just think it's super cool that it's technically running on original Genesis hardware as well. And in some ways, it is a little more stable than the later Saturn ports that we'll be looking at. This version doesn't have the polygon warping and popping nearly as bad as the Saturn version does, nor does it have the problem with the rings themselves flickering and going crazy. So in some respects, this version actually has its own merits where it stands pretty well against its contemporaries. Look at that chest. Look at that beautiful chest. And now we will get to the bane of my existence, Cage or Kage, depending on which version of which part of the world you're asking. So the original Virtua Fighter gets crazy hard starting around stage 3 or 4. And I have beaten this game, but I have no idea how I did it. Even with a move list open next to me, I could not progress any farther than Kage here. So I think with this one under our belt, we can move on to the next version. Now we will be looking at the US Saturn version. Prepare for battle. As you can see, we have slightly nicer looking versions of the original poly renders of the faces. But as you can kind of already see, just looking at the background stage here, this version has crazy polygon warping and popping. Like, look at Wolf's knee there. Just keeps freaking out. So while this version, clearly the textures on the rings and the polygons on the models themselves are higher quality than the 32X one, it now has this crazy problem with polygon warping and polygon popping. It becomes especially pronounced during the replays, where sometimes whole sections of a character's body will just disappear. But other than the graphical presentation, the game sounds much better than the 32X version. The CD audio really does make a big difference. The game plays still extremely well. It feels slightly faster than the 32X version, and I think that's because it's running at the 60 frames per second the arcade version runs at, and not the 30 frames per second that the 32X version runs at. But this port was a real letdown. So the Japanese version is actually worse. Polygon popping problem actually even more pronounced than the US version. They fixed some things, so I thought it would be better just to look at the US version. And this is the fixed version. Wolf's knees still do that in the fixed version. So the big issue here is this game came out right at the same time Tekken did. The console version did. At least in the United States. So in Japan, this game got to come out unopposed on the Saturn in 1994. And it did extremely well in Japan. However, this game never really connected in the US the way it did in Japan. And then when you throw in the fact that the Saturn port looks the way it does, so the way the game looks in combination with the fact that the franchise was never especially popular in the United States was really a 1-2 KO for the Saturn version of this game in the West, almost from day one. And it's such a shame because I think that this version of the game should have just not been released. If it wasn't ready for prime time, it shouldn't have come out. I really do think that. I think having a later port for your game versus one that everybody sort of poo-poos is infinitely better, because I mean you don't get another chance to make a first impression, and because of that, I think Virtua Fighter struggled in the West for years. I think this Saturn port in particular did a lot of harm to the franchise. It felt stagnant and backwards, where you had Tekken, which was this breath of fresh air. There's also Battle Arena Toshiden, which was the launch game that this got compared to against a lot. And graphically, Toshinden does wipe the floor with Virtua Fighter here. Gameplay-wise, it's a completely different story. The original Toshinden, and I guess all four of them, play like hot garbage. But you know, back in 1995, when all people wanted was decent-looking polygons that didn't quiver and pop in, that carried the day. And instead, we got a good-playing but really poor-looking version for the Sega Saturn. Hello, friends. This is Retro Remy, and we are playing Virtua Fighter Remix for the Sega Saturn. This is my favorite version of the original Virtua Fighter. I like they ditched the rough-looking pre-rendered polys for the faces at the character select screen. Went with an animated style that they would keep for Virtua Fighter 2 as well. The big thing here is they actually put textures on the models. If you got to enjoy the footage of the first two versions of this game prior, then you'll see that before this they were just flat shaded polygons, and this was the first one where they'd actually have textures on them. And I think the effect is actually pretty good. It puts it much more in line with Tekken of the same era. Polygons still look a little jacked in spots, like look at Wolf's hip there. But it does look noticeably better. This is also be the version that I would spend the most time with. Because I got it when I got my Sega Saturn. When I purchased my Saturn from a thrift store way back in 2003. I got one previous to that, but I didn't keep it long. But when I finally started collecting for the system, it was like 2002, 2003, right around there. And it came with Sega's always so hard. It came with Virtua Fighter Remix, Virtua Fighter 2, and Virtua Cop, and Daytona USA. So I got 4 games with my Saturn. And honestly, I loved all of them. I played a ton of every single one of them. Even with their problems, and even at the stage of gaming we were at, I still had a lot of fun with all of them. But the ones that I played the most were definitely Virtua Fighter Remix and Virtua Fighter 2. Because like the games feel different. So this one actually feels different than the first 2 versions of Virtua Fighter that would appear on Sega's platforms. It feels faster, and the overall feels a little bit smoother. It also doesn't have nearly the same issue with the polygon pop-in that the first version on the Saturn has. It still has some. They couldn't get rid of it entirely, but it's nowhere near as bad. Oh, look at that one jump. There we go. But I definitely think that Cage, Kage. Yeah, so round 4 in every single version of this game, round 4 always puts me through the ringer. I really wish the original Virtua Fighter had sidestepping. I feel like this game would be infinitely better with it. It's so easy to forget that the first 2 Virtua Fighter games do not have sidestepping. That wouldn't be something introduced until the 3rd game. And we got a version of the Virtua Fighter 3 sidestepping actually in Fighters Megamix, a game I definitely plan on looking at. Oh god. Yeah, there's still some wild stuff that happens with the backgrounds and visual screw-ups. Oh yeah, giant swing. Oh, it does so much damage. It does so much damage. And I'm dead. The damage in the original Virtua Fighter is just insane. I mean, it's always pretty high, but the original one is just crazy. Ah! Anything else I want to say about the original Virtua Fighter? You know, I think for the time frame these games came out, so the original one came out in arcades in 1993, and this version came out in 1995, so we're talking about 2 years here. It's sort of interesting to see the evolution of the game itself, because Virtua Fighter Remix looks like almost a completely different game than the Virtua Fighter 32X version. If you said that this was Virtua Fighter 2, I wouldn't have believed you. Oh god. Let's see that replay. Oh! Look at that ground shaking. Alright. Yeah, I think I'm good on this. The original Virtua Fighter games are ridiculously hard. The AI on them, I have no idea how I beat these games, but the AI on them is just brutal. And after stage 3 or 4, it does not want you to see the final boss. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, this has been Retro Remy. I hope you enjoyed this look at the original Virtua Fighter. If not, let me know what games you would like me to take a look at. But if you did, I'll continue to take a look at all these old fighting games. I definitely want to look at Virtua Fighter 2, I want to look at Tekken, I want to look at all of it. But yeah, take it easy. Like and subscribe if you dig what I'm doing. Yeah, take it easy.